Are recording. So we had three discussion questions on the table. The first one being, what is the thesis of the text? The second being, what image comes to mind when you hear the term Mandingo? And finally, how does the Mandingo stereotype, lead to dehumanizing African men? Who would like to share what was discussed in their breakout rooms? Oh, my shirt. My shirt says white supremacy versus gods. Yeah, GODs. So, I mean, draw your line and saying what side you want to be on, side with gods or the other, the op. But who wants to share what's on what you guys talked about in the breakout rooms? We could call at random or someone could volunteer. It's up to you. All right, go ahead, Noah. Thank you.
Okay, 1 sec. Let me get my notes because I wrote it down.
Okay, take your time.
For the thesis, we said for the thesis of the text, we said that as a group we came up with, any stereotypes can be hurtful, even if they seem to be positive.
Okay.
And then, wait, do you want me to go through all three questions?
Whatever you feel. You don't have to.
I'll go through two, I guess.
Okay.
As a group, we came up with the image of African-American male when we hear Mandingo, sorry. Mm-hmm. We think of African-American sexual parts. Mm-hmm. And that's what we talked about.
Thank you, Noah. Who else wanted to share what was discussed in their breakout room? Okay. Stephanie, what was discussed in your breakout room? Stephanie Vega.
Oh, sorry. Mm-hmm. I need to change my name again. It's Anayi.
Okay.
Yeah.
You are always on somebody else's Zoom, huh? Like
no, because my brother's girlfriend had to log in. And she came over and I was like, oh, you can use my account. So I never got the chance to change the name. So I'm always texting her like, oh, like, are we in the same class? But we discussed that something about men can be loved because at a point of the reading there was a question saying that they can be loved, and we talked about how baby boomers are stuck in their ways and how it relates to the reading, how like they're closed-minded and whatnot.
Okay, so you put a age category in the ways that kind of make these stereotypes static. Okay, I can get with that. LJ?
Okay, in our group, so first off, I just want to say this was a very interesting read by Professor Bush. A very interesting read. When I read it, it made me obviously like rethink the definition of Mandingo, because growing up, I had a slightly different. I never thought of it like sexual, but more like a strong black man. So I thought that was interesting. So after I read the article, I'm like, man, who is this? Because I couldn't, I didn't know exactly who this person was, except for the fact that he's at Cal State LA. So I said, man, let me look up this dude. So I Googled him and say, who is this that everybody, all the women going crazy about, right? So I Googled him and I'm like, okay. And I'm like, the first thing I thought is I've seen posters of him on campus. Like, I think he won like a outstanding professor award, right? So I'm like, okay. I saw younger pictures. I'm like, okay, he's a light-skinned black man, bald head, light colored eyes, good looking dude. So I'm like, well, in my opinion, I think he's benefited from being a good looking black man. Obviously, I guess he works out, so he has a physique. And I think, so one side of it said, well, I think, he benefits from looking good, right? I don't think Cornel West got that problem. I don't think nobody's touching Cornel West. So I think he just benefits from looking good, right? And then the second part is obviously, some of the other details of the article where you know, Dr. Lawson talks about, you know, like wondering if black men K through 12, right, in the education system are being, you know, kind of looked at, right, in that sexualized / intimidating or fearful way with the black men. And in our group, we had some interesting conversations about that. So we, you know, we kind of shared that, you know, we growing up, maybe it's cultural. I know I growing up, when I thought about the Mandingo, man, I just thought about like a strong black man, kind of like the Zulu warrior, the Mandingo warrior. I didn't actually attribute it to like the sexualized aspect, but I think Dr. Bush, I think he benefits, man, from good looks, you know, and I think that can be for any good looking black man in the space. And I was even wondering, I'm like, well, Professor, this is something you can probably speak to, you know, in certain spaces you've been in. Have you had like similar experiences?
I ain't never got my face touched none of that shit in the academy. But just right for context, Cornel West. This is a old picture of Cornel West, right? And he look a lot different now. But nah, I can't say that I have. When I was younger, but not in like from an academic standpoint, you know what I mean? And then also a good portion of my time within the academy has been at Cal State LA, you know what I mean? So a lot of the people here already know me as a student transitioning into the professor role. And then also, majority of my lecture time has been via Zoom. So I haven't really been in person. So, you know, I don't know. We'll see. I'll keep you posted, LJ. If something happens, I will let you know, right? It might be a follow-up article shit. Who can't call it? Armani.
Hi. So for number 3, how does Mandingo stereotypes lead to dehumanizing African males? We put over sexualizing African males, and hearing that terminology, I would hear it solely on television with white women stating when they see an African or a black male that they thought who was attractive, they would use that terminology. And I can tell that it was more of a sexual base. So that's the only reason why I know that terminology versus the original meaning of it. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
That's interesting. And I think for me, right, like, I wasn't around a lot of white women to be able to hear it from that context. I always interpreted kind of more so like LJ in the sense of a Mandingo warrior, you know. So the sexualization didn't come until I engaged the article years back. But maybe I wasn't in the right spaces to hear how women talk about it in that fashion. So I think you may have a little more insight than I had, Armani. Thank you. Does anyone else want to share before I jump into my notes? All right. Really short article, right? Like 5 pages. But a couple of things for me, right? I don't know how many of you all were like attentive to the locations that he articulates, right? So he doesn't say what college it was, but he says it's a college in Texas, it's a college in Arkansas, and then I come to a university in Southern California. What do you think the significance is of him mentioning those localities? Go ahead, Sheree.
Just the fact of like when you hear Arkansas, you think white, and then when you say Texas, you think, okay, black people, you're the starting of the American heritage as far as African people coming here. Most of them went to the southern states. So you think, okay, majority black people. And then when you get to Southern California, it's like diversity. It's like all colors, you know, of the rainbow. It's like strictly white, predominantly black, and then you have everyone there. Is I thought was like a good insinuation, giving you a feel of like, because he said, I think it was Arkansas that he said that the white woman touched his face, and then in Texas they're like, oh, I'm scared, which that was like slavery times, or it's like
the scared was actually in California. The scared part was in California.
Okay.
Texas was, I'm sorry, I didn't know.
That's kind of like a switch. I would think the opposite, since I feel like Southern California is more a little more progressive in the sense of inclusiveness. So okay, yeah.
And I think, Sheree, that latter point that you just made is really the point, right?
Yeah.
So when you think about Arkansas, you think of somewhere that is archaic in their thinking, right? They're still situated in the old time. When you hear Texas, even still, southern state, right? Yes, there's a lot of Black folks in Texas. There's a lot of white folks in Texas too, right? And then he also says, he doesn't say it, but knowing him, I know the university was Texas A&M, right? So it's the Army Military University. And then California, to your point, Cherie, is like, you would think that this is more progressive. A lot of the things that he dealt with in the South, he won't deal with here, but he comes here and now they're afraid of him, right? So this is why, for me, I believe that the localities of these occurrences become important, right? So we discussed in passing, right, the hand of the white faculty member caressed the side of his face, but then this idea and this notion that we need to keep him, right? And not due to his intellectual capacity, right? But just because she had a sexual attraction to him, she wanted to keep him. So again, sexual property is what this terminology for me implicitly embodies, right? Then he moves to Texas. He mentioned that she brushed into his office, being embarrassed, saying over and over that she's sorry she did not know his work, right? She did not give him the appropriate intellectual reverence that he deserved. In fact, she didn't even take the time to read any of his materials prior to coming to the interview. So how are you supposed to interview someone and not read their resume, right? Not go over who they are as they are applying to to the position, right? So for me, more implicitly, what that also embodies is this notion that she's expecting him not to be equipped, but she's not prepared her damn self. She didn't even do her own homework to do what she needs to do to be able to be an effective interviewer. And then he moves to Southern California. You could only assume what university he's speaking to, right? And he says, one of the most ethnically diverse campuses in the nation, right? So it's not like they're unfamiliar with Black bodies or unfamiliar with Black men. This is a place, this is California, right? There are all the ethnicities are represented, right? And he says, yet, and evident in all these conversations is the dialectic experience by Black males of being both sexually feared and sexually desired, right? And that's the dialectic, right? I'm afraid of you to a certain degree, but I also desire you sexually, right? And this is this idea of the taboo that makes Blackness attractive, right? I went to high school, so I'm from the IE, right? So like, Pomona is like the beginning of the IE from west moving east, right? So it's like Pomona, Claremont, Diamond Bar, Ontario, Rancho Cucamonga. Grew up in Pomona, moved to Rancho for high school, played sports, right? Played football. Rancho, I entered high school 99, I believe. My sophomore year, sophomore on varsity, we win CIF, right? Rancho operated as a high school, like y'all might not know the reference, I'm too old, but like this is a movie called Varsity Blues, right? Where like the high school football team was like a college team, right? And folks who play sports had carte blanche. Like you could do whatever the fuck you wanted at Rancho if you play football, right? But there's also a large white population there, right? Cheerleaders, all that. So the sexual desire that he talks about, I was able to experience there. I was pretty good at playing football, right? Earned a full ride scholarship to Oregon State. So what happens is when you earn scholarships, you get to go on what's called visits, and you kind of go check out the campus, and they're supposed to kind of like show you a good time, right? Fly from Ontario to whatever the airport is in Oregon, get off the plane, and there's two white girls with signs, right? And they have me and my homeboy's name on a sign. When I went, my parents go with me, right? So they see us and they have like this little devious look on their face. And behind us is my parents. So when they see my parents, the smirk goes from a smirk to a frown, right? And they were very distraught and confused by the fact that I brought my parents, because what they were tasked to do, right, to show me a good time. For those who've seen He Got Game, the little scene with Jesus Shuttleworth, that's kind of what they were set in place to do, right? So this idea of being fetished is very prominent in the Black male experience, especially if you play sports, right? Where your body becomes objectified from the standpoint of you being an athlete, right? And then that objectification continues on to where you're now a sexual object of the white female bodies that, you know, make up that campus population, right? So this is how the Black body could be turned into a thing sexually, right? And he argues that the Mandingo is the manifestation of stereotypical Black male sexuality that is characterized as having superior strength, an unusually large sex organ, and an insatiable sexual appetite. Stereotypes work as a dehumanizing agent. People do not see Black men as we are. Rather, they see a constructed image that relegates us to being an object, and humanity becomes invisible, right? So these stereotypes, they render our humanity invisible, and they continue to make us objects. In this case, right, they reduce us to a phallus, to a phallic symbol, right? Just to the Black penis is what we're reduced to. And this is what he's arguing. Again, really short article, so it's not a lot to really, from the literature standpoint, to unpack, but there's a lot to unpack from what he's arguing and the themes that he's dealing with. We'll move into our fishbowl. Recall that you have 2 fishbowls a semester, 1 time to pass. You could pull from my notes, you could pull from your journals, or you could pull from your breakout room conversations. Does anyone want to volunteer for our fishbowl? Alexandria, thank you. And Lizette. I think Lizette, you got your 2 for the semester, and Cherie, Lizette and Cherie. I think Cherie, this is your second one also, correct me if I'm wrong.
This is my second one too, Professor.
Okay, perfect, thank you. All right, anyone else want to volunteer, or we can just go with those 3? All right, whoever wants to start it off out of Alexandria, Lizette, and Cherie, it's on you.
I can start off. I just wanted to share my notes that I wrote. So I put that would be relating to the thesis that I think. So I put the harsh sexualization and stereotypes of Black men is dehumanizing and creates a very narrow window of what a Black man can and cannot be. If they are not sexually desired, then they are a sexual threat. And it reminded me of the last reading with Trayvon Martin. If they're not exactly where they, in quotes, need to be, they're also a threat, are subject to violence or killing. And what we do by perpetuating these stereotypes like the Mandingo, it forces Black men to be stuck in these rigid do's and don'ts. And they don't get the quality of, I don't know what it would be called, maybe manifest destiny that everyone else has. And maybe they don't, not that they're not worthy of love, but they almost they don't have access to love or to be themselves, the ability to make effort or have compassion and receive love. And that's what really stuck out to me.
Good call, Alexandra, thank you. Who's next?
I can go. To piggyback off of what Alexandria said, I was gonna say the same thing, but going off of that being the fact that they're more wanted when they're sexualized, it becomes like a mush of everything as far as relationships, especially interracial relationships. From my experience, how when I see a white woman with a Black male, he's always paying, she's always with the kids, touching their hair and telling them how beautiful it is. There's no connection between the male or the husband or the partner as much as it is with the kids. And then from experience, just viewing this, from an outside point of view, is when I see white men with Black women, they're not touching their hair and groping them in public. It's more so of a concern, they're treating them a certain kind of way as far as what I've seen. I'm sure it's also fetishized as well. When white people call us Black women, oh, Black queen, my chocolate goddess. If you can't say that to a white woman, my white chocolate princess, don't say it to me, because it's very racist. And the subject brings it towards that as far as having interracial children, where they feel some type of way. Either they feel like they're on this white high status, or they feel like they're a part of the Black community, but then it turns into something negative as far as being deflective, not enough for the Black community. And I feel like all that stems from the whole Mandingo concept, the whole Black men are looked at sexual pieces of meat basically, and not actual people. That's all their worth, is to please and to be sexual, not to be intelligent, not to be smart. And as far as that goes, like it becomes this bigger thing, especially when it's interracial, because it's like they can never understand how their partner is or feels, because they see them as a partner. But if you can't, like we said previously, if you can't see my color, then you don't understand me, because my color is who I am 100% of the time. I can't turn it off and turn it on. So I just wanted to say that from the article is how it's like developing with people in general.
Thank you, Sheree. Good call out. Lizette?
I actually passed today.
Didn't you, one of your Lizette's volunteer, I thought.
Yeah, but can I still speak even if I have two done already?
Yeah, you already had two? Yeah, you can. Oh, for sure.
Okay, I just wanted to point out that I really didn't know what Mandingo was until I read it and gave it a more clarification. I didn't really look at the definition until after I read the article, and I could just see that even just the pronunciation of the word is very sexualizing. So to read upon that Black men are overly sexualized, I see it like in sports, in social media, and just pretty much everywhere. And I guess like the masculinity that comes with Black men becomes sexualized.
Yeah, sexualized or feared, right? Yeah, good call out. You know, I was listening to Alexandria, and she kind of posed the question through working through the article, you know, can Black men be loved? And what it made me think is like, by what we're reduced to, right? Like, does anyone have an emotional, loving connection to a dildo, right? Because essentially what they're reducing this to is a sexual organ, right? And if it's only for that pleasure, how much love can be applied to an object that's strictly designed to give you pleasure? So to me, I would equate that to a dildo, right? It's the same type of exchange, the same type of experience. So I don't know if it's a love that is being exchanged, a lust, maybe a fetishization that Cherie is bringing up. And I think she also brings up some very interesting claims when it pertains to interracial relationships. I never did that. Was never my bag. I've always had a very deep infatuation, love, appreciation, and respect for Black women. But again, where I went to high school, I seen a lot of brothers kind of teetering around that, right? And when I would hear their conversations, you would hear the fetish in the relationship. It's not really about who they are, it's about what they can do or what they think they can do. On that note, anybody watch the show Insecure? Issa Rae, HBO?
I've watched like a couple episodes, but I haven't like had the time to get into it.
I've watched it.
Okay. There's a for those who are like hella familiar, really brilliant show, one, because what it does, it depicts the Black quotidian. And when I say quotidian, just, you know, projects Black people doing everyday things. But in the show really centered around the protagonist, Issa Rae, and her love interest name is Lawrence, right? They break up, woody woo. But while Lawrence is single, he is buying some liquor at a liquor store or at a restaurant or at a grocery store, excuse me, and he forgets his wallet. Two white women pay for his wallet, right? Or pay for his drinks. They end up going back to his home, to their home, excuse me. They get it in, right? But what they show very well is that fetishization. They make Lawrence not a person anymore, but that Mandingo, right? And as soon as he's not able to please them sexually, they're ready to do away with him, right? And I think that Issa Rae does a very good job of kind of providing nuance to that dynamic, right? And to me, it's interesting how a lot of Black men clamor to kind of have these experiences with white women, and they don't realize that they're clamoring to devalue themselves or to take their humanity out of their own experiences, right? It's also this old adage that, you know, the interracial relationships for a lot of these individuals is just to make daddy mad, right? Like, when you have this experience, piss daddy off a little bit, then I'm gonna go back to my normative experiences. So again, it's not about seeing you in your fullness, not about seeing your full humanity. It's about how you could be utilized for me at this present time, right? And for me, that's a direct correlation back to the plantation system, right? Because in the plantation society, the Black body was used for labor, used for reproduction, and whatever else that could come to the white imagination to make them have pleasure, to make them have pain, whatever the case may be. There's a very brilliant book by Saidiya Hartman called Scenes of Subjection. And she talks about how the Black body is a site to produce sadistic pleasure, right? To produce sadistic pain. And it's all at the behest of the white body and what they seek to manifest. Alexandra, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna like piggyback off what you said and say like that's totally like perpetuated today with like the porn industry. Like everything that you're saying of like going back to the plantation, and now it's like fetishized, and even I guess I because of how prominent it is in porn, I would say it's normalized too.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right, Alexandra. I didn't want to go there, but you're right. You're right.
I'm sorry. I mean,
hey, look, we're all grown shit. People watch that shit. You know what I mean? I think LJ also brings up a good point, right? Get Out. Very, very brilliant piece of art that really depicts this. And it does it from a very nuanced perspective, right? Because if you think about the protagonist, Chris, they want his eyes because he's a photographer, right? So it's about being able to separate aspects and disembody the Black body and able to utilize what they feel is of importance. And this also relates directly to how picnics were manifested. Does anyone know the etymology of the term picnic? And when I say etymology, it's like the origin of it from a linguistic standpoint.
Yeah, excuse my language, but if I'm correct, it's pick a nigga.
Yep, pick a nigga and hang him. That's the original term for a picnic. So when they would have these picnics, right, they would be social events. So the whole town would close up. They would pack picnic baskets, right? And they would all go to this event and watch this individual be hung, burnt, and disembodied, okay? And when they do the disembodying, they would receive souvenirs, right? Some people would get the hand, some people would get the foot, some people would get the arm. The most valued souvenir was the genitalia, right? So this idea of disembodying, it has a long legacy in American history. In fact, there's this documentary, I don't remember the name of it, but it talks about how when homes were being sold in the South, right? And they would go into the basement to kind of clear out these basements to sell the homes, they would find these body parts that were preserved as souvenirs, right? So this disembodying the Black body and reducing the Black body to parts has a very long legacy in American folklore and American history. Yeah, please go ahead, Anna.
For the fishbowl, I want to share the last sentence where he said, however, the stereotypical image of Mandingo has been allowed to run rampant in society. I think it's about time to put him away. I feel like that was like very interesting because like he's speaking for like everybody else that it's like time to cut it out, that like it's done for, like that shit's old type, you know?
Yeah.
That I feel like that's what we should do in like everything, like, you know, Mexicans are this, white people are this. Like I feel like we should just cut it and like move on and like start a new chapter. But it's also like years and decades of the, you know, like what we have to like endure. So I feel like that spoke to me a lot. And like, you know,
and I would argue, and that's the thesis of the text, right? Not often are theses placed at the end, but in this case it is, right? He problematizes this notion of Mandingo, right? He provides examples of how this notion dehumanizes. And then very clearly he states his thesis that we need to do away with this shit. That shit's old, right? So very well articulated. Thank you, Anna.
And I'm Stephanie, by the way.
I'm sorry, say it again?
I'm also Stephanie, so like
right, Anai / Stephanie / whoever you was last week, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the chat. Cherie, can you kind of articulate that a little bit more, Cherie?
Yeah, it's called a bullying. Yeah, it's when the slave master, the white slave master would take the strongest, blackest enslaved Black man and rape him in front of the women and children to show that he's not strong enough to provide. And that's what I was saying, like Mandingo also, like you guys had said, that it was insinuated with like strong and Black and intelligent and stuff, but also like a lot of the words that we're learning today are still slave terms, just recreated and washed over and reused. So I was just letting everyone know that bullying is also like a part of the Mandingo situation as well.
Yeah, another way to articulate the bullying is is buck breaking, right? It's another term that they use for bullying, and it's the same process, right? The sodomization of the Black male to steal and take away his manhood. I had planned to kind of get into that conversation a little bit more in next week's reading, but since it's brought up, we could address that too while leading into next week. And for me, so buck breaking was very, very popular in the Caribbean, especially areas like Jamaica, right? And if you are a fan of like dancehall and reggae music, it has vast elements of homophobia in there, vast elements of homophobia. In fact, a lot of dancehall and reggae artists' careers were ended because of their anti-homophobic rhetoric, right? Or anti-homosexual rhetoric, excuse me. But, right, history is important, right? And Malcolm X always says that out of all of our studies, history is best required or best situated to reward our results, right? So if you know the history and you know how buck breaking was rampant in Jamaica, it would make sense as to why Jamaicans have a culture that has a very, very negative outlook towards homosexuality, right? Because if you've seen your grandfathers being buck breaking, right, you're not gonna look at that and have a nuanced and inclusive view of that. In fact, you're gonna have a very negative outlook, and you're gonna view that type of lifestyle, right, as foreign. Because what you see with your own eyes are white men doing this to your ancestors, doing this to your fathers, your uncles, et cetera, right? So that understanding allows you to see why in cultures like Jamaica and cultures like dancehall and cultures like Rastafari, they have a very negative outlook towards homosexuality, right? Because in their understanding, that lifestyle is a conduit, is a means to devalue, dehumanize, and take the masculinity away from Black men, right? So to me, this context is very important when engaging Jamaican culture. You can't just say, oh, they're homophobic or they're anti-homosexuality, right? Without really knowing this why. And these historical contexts become important. Can you kind of speak to that, LJ, what you put in the chat?
Yeah, so and correct me if I'm wrong, bro, because I mean, I understand that sometimes when you get information, it may be correct, it may be half truth. My understanding is that sagging originated, when these white men and slave masters would, molest and sexually assault these Black men, and so sagging symbolized to the other white culture that he's been broken. This person has been broken, or in the context of butt breaking, he's been broken, and so this is a symbolism for all to see that this Black man has been sodomized.
Yeah, and I can't speak to the historical accuracy of that, but I did receive the same information and how it was told to me also. it started from the plantation society and then continued on to the prison systems, and then it spilled over into pop culture to where it becomes popular. So that there is, from my understanding, at least, right, there's a folklore that supports this notion, and it's an oral tradition that's been told and been passed down from generation to generation.
Professor, I just wanted to add too, just to that, I just wanted to add that me personally, so I try my best because, you know, you can't really tell people what to do. But when I do come across young Black men, I do tell them, hey, pull your pants up. I kind of give them that context, number one. Secondly, if you notice, it's like sagging is part of the black culture, right? You don't really see other cultures sagging. And it kind of, like you said, it kind of speaks to the historical context of it as well. You know, the idea that it's cool, like you said, it kind of went to prison. And so in prison, it has a similar meaning. Mm-hmm. It has a very similar meaning, but I do try my best for those reasons to try to reason with folks and tell them, like, hey, you know, look, this is the history of it. Like, it's not cute. I don't know what girls like men, you know, sagging. So, you know, I try to give them that advice.
Yeah. I you know, from my vantage point, it seems like that's not as popular as it was when I was growing up, right? Like which was a really weird phenomenon, was like the skinny jeans, and then the sagging of the skinny jeans was kind of like this weird looking to me. But it seems like we're kind of phasing away from that by and large. But what I will say though, kind of provides a broader perspective. It was predominant in the Black culture, but because of Black culture being really pop culture, it became proliferated in all other aspects of culture. And I just remember, like, junior high school, even white boys was doing it, right? And the skaters would be sagging as well. So to me, because of the popularity of Black culture, it begins to become American culture. Lizette said, yeah, she ain't rocking with the sagging. It's a bad look. I agree. And it's uncomfortable, right? And to me, it's antithetical to gangbanging, right? Because if some shit go down and you need to run, the last thing you want to be trying to do is pull up your pants. Like, you're trying to fight, you got to pull up your pants to fight. Like, what are we doing? You know what I mean? Like, if you're really about it, you in the streets, homie, have a belt on and be ready to get down when it's time to get down, right? That's like, to me, wearing sandals and flip-flops outside. You're unprepared to defend yourself when the time comes. Yeah, same thing with skinny. You can't move your legs, homie. You ain't getting away. You know what I'm saying? You gotta put some elastic in that motherfucker to be able to move. I don't know. But I'd be on survival mode sometimes, you know. Other thoughts about the article. It's a lot to kind of unpack here. I would like to hear some other people's thinking. Catherine, what are you thinking about the reading and the discussion?
I thought the reading was very interesting, and something I brought up to my group was how towards the end he mentions how he was interested in wondering how Black males are portrayed from K through 12. And I thought that was interesting because they're sexualizing adults. So it's like, are they also doing it to like young kids? And I feel like it also like limits them or like puts them down, because it's like people are thinking that you can't succeed in life and they're just sexualizing you. But there's so much like kids are still learning, like there's a bright future for them.
Yeah, you know, and you bring up a good point, Catherine, and it makes me think about, right, like one of the things, the part of the intellectual project, right, let's not look at these articles and readings in isolation. Bring them in conversation with each other, right? So if one article argues that Black boys are not having the chance to be young and they're looked at automatically as men, right? Then you would have to assume that they're also being sexualized like the men are, because as a society, according to the article, by and large, they don't allow the Black boys to be boys. They're already positioning them as men. So if they're being positioned as men, then they're being also sexualized as men. Are you LJ, you want me to give an example, or do you want to give an example of being sexualized as a football player?
No, I was just saying to her point, you kind of gave an example when you say, like you said, you're playing high school football, you had the girls there with your sign, you know, so if you think about it, like, that's kind of an example. Like you weren't 18 yet, right?
Right. Nope.
I mean, you know, you was a teenager. So I think that's example. And
yeah.
So there's examples. So to prove that point, like there are examples K through 12 of Black men being sexualized. We hear about it all the time, maybe in different ways. Unfortunately, we hear stories too of these same Black men are being sexualized by white women, just used as example, and how it can turn against them, right?
Yeah.
If the white woman cries wolf,
Yep.
now it's rape. Now it's all this other stuff.
And to that point, there is a vast historical record of white women pursuing young boys, right? Young Black boys. And then when the curtain falls, they claim rape because they don't want to take responsibility for their predatory actions. Vast historical evidence of that. Let's get 2 more comments and we'll call it a day. Who haven't we heard from? Lanisha, what's your thoughts on the conversation today?
I know I sorry. I discussed something in a group when we was talking about like how we prescribe, like how we see Mandingo, like how we grew up with that. And I mentioned that I never understood it as a sexualization of men. Like I didn't know that. Like I just knew like it was a word that described West Africans and Black men in general. I never knew that it was a word for like a sexualization of men. And then he also touched on something in the article when he said that that word basically describes them as it views Black men as an object instead of being viewed as a person. Like their humanity is invisible instead of visible.
Yeah.
So that's what I got with that.
Good call, Lanisha. Thank you. Marquisha, why don't you close us out today? Excuse me. Any thoughts you had on the conversation or the reading?
Yeah, definitely. I actually grew up in a predominantly white place in Washington, Seattle. So this really related to me, not even just with but me as a Black woman with white men and everything like that. So it's really touched home. But kind of what I really wanted to share is directly like my nephew. My nephew, he's light skinned, athletic, football player, and that's how it is in his high school. And when we brought in the children thing, it's true because he struggles in math, but he gets, he still gets to play in the games and he still gets to do whatever. He's like, oh, his name is Malachi. And, he's a charmer. So, he charms the teachers, the white teachers, and he gets away with stuff. But then he's like, man, like I'm struggling, and now, he didn't get a full ride to school like he thought he was going to do because of his grades.
Yep.
So that was something when somebody just brought it for kids, I was like, wow, that's like hit it right on the hammer, So it does like play a part in kids too, not just with their worth or whatever, but their educational and where can they be, like you said, except just an object or an asset to the school, right? Because if he's going to these championships, if he's winning, it makes them look good. But at the end of the day, he just graduated and now he's like, man, now I got to go to community college. Now, you know what I'm saying?
Nah, like literally, Marquisha, that was my life. Like I graduated high school with a 1.8 GPA. Right? Like literally, you can't even play unless you have a 2.0, but somehow I played every game, right? I should have been kicked out of that school at least 8 times, at least. Like that's twice a year, right? But you were good at what you do, so yeah, just turn the other cheek. So, and what ended up happening, I couldn't even fulfill my scholarship to Oregon State because my grades were so poor. And what happens at the time, the lower your grades are, the higher the SAT score you have to have. So I had to have like an astronomical SAT score. There was no way in hell I wasn't able to get that score. But for the school, right, Rancho wasn't tripping. They got out of me what they wanted. I got on, I graduated, they done with me, right? So these are other ways where when your humanity isn't valued or seen, it has very ill consequences. And I thought I was getting over by not having to do homework and not having to turn in assignments and just talking my way out of tests or whatever the case may be, right? I thought I'm coming up. But it really shot me in the ass in the long run. So I completely agree with your nephew's circumstances.
Yeah, like, and just one more thing, last thing, just to bring it to like my own personal thing, like growing up when you're predominantly in like a white school, white neighborhood, whatever too, was kind of like the Black boys went with the white girls and the Black girls ended up with the white guys. And it's kind of been this thing of like me dating, back in the day, because that's all I would date would be like white boys or whatever. And it's not because that's what I liked or whatever. It's just like, I didn't get play from the Black guys, I didn't get attention from the Black guys. And so now as you get older, you have like so many things that it plays a part. It's crazy, you know, this whole fetish size thing. And then you have to be like, is it because I'm Black, or is it because, you know, they like me and it just so happens that they're white, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's crazy, the whole Black body, the fetish thing, you know. It takes a toll on you, man or woman. So yeah, it was a really good article. Thank you.
So yeah, you know, we ain't got a lot of time, so I'm not going to go too far into this, but that interracial conversation is a whole other conversation itself. That could be a whole seminar course, unpacking that. And for me, where I kind of always pinpoint is, are you being valued, right? Because what has not been removed is the power dynamics. And are you in this relationship to level up socially, or is it really a relationship? You know what I mean? And it's hard to separate the historicity of these two communities to come into a relationship and just allow that to be what it is, right? And I thought it was very interesting during the summer of 2020, if you were online, you see a lot of people who were in interrelational relationships, and then the circumstance that happened, and now they're at odds with one another because racism is now put on the table, right? And for me, it doesn't make sense, or I cannot conceive for the life of me going through a circumstance that's predicated to my body, to my epidermis, and then coming home and having to deal with that and not having a partner that understands that off the bat, right? So for me, just off of that standpoint alone, I'm disqualified for interracial relationships, right? And moreover, even outside of that, like the pure beauty in Black women, like just the pure unadulterated beauty in Black women, I can't see anything else. That's just, that's where my mind has been operated. I mean, you go into Africa and the diversity of Black women and the diversity of beauty in Black women, it's just, it's mind blowing. Like God knew what he was doing when he made y'all. Like he put his work in on that one. We'll call it a day there. Yeah, looking at the comment from Sheree. What I do want to do real quick though, how do y'all feel about our midterm? Do you want to kind of hold it off and allow it to coincide with the spring break? That way you don't have to do reading and a midterm, or are you okay with having the midterm review next week and then taking the midterm over the weekend? What would you, so let me do it this way. If you would prefer to have it over spring break, give me some kind of cue, either raise your hand, nod your head or something, put in the chat. Okay. Okay. So it looks like it's about even. Spring break. So Marquise, you said before spring break. Okay. It looks like the majority is going spring break. So if that's the case, yeah, the majority are going spring break. If you want Marquise, since you're the only one who would rather have it, I can assign it to you and you can just turn it in if that's what you prefer. I
just want to get it over with.
No, I do also too. That's why I want to do before spring break. I don't want to be bothered with all that.
Okay, yeah. What I could do, I could send it out to you too. And that way you could have it and turn it in. That way you're not bothered with spring break. But for everyone else, one thing though, if I do it that way, y'all, like you won't get the review because I'm gonna do a review the week before spring break. So I don't want you guys to miss out on that opportunity.
No, I'll wait. I want the review.
Okay.
Can I ask what the midterm's about? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so it's gonna be 5 essay questions on the reading material we've covered so far. I'll ask you to choose 3 of the 5 questions, and then you just have to answer those questions. The only thing that I'll emphasize is you want to answer the question completely, right? So, for example, one question may read, how old are African people? Was a significant individual prior to European contact? And then why is this information important, right? So if you're listening closely, those are like 3 questions in one. So you want to make sure you're answering all 3 of those questions to get full points. So that's essentially how it will be broken down, and they'll be pertaining to the readings and the material we've covered throughout the semester. Does that make sense, Lanisha?
Yeah, it makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. And then again, what we'll do is spend the week before spring break going over that material, doing a midterm review, making sure you're comfortable. I'll hand out a midterm study guide, and then we'll just cover that study guide throughout the remainder of the culture and call that a day. I'm sorry, throughout the remainder of the course and call that a day. So let me do this real quick. Since we are having reading material for next week, let me show you what that is, and then we'll call it a wrap. All right. So for next week, here we go. Next week will be fuck your gender norms. So it'll be this PDF here, fuck your gender norms. We'll read and we'll discuss that. And then, yeah, that'll be our material for next week. I will email that out to everyone by Thursday or Friday, but if you don't want to wait, you can start to engage that material now. Is there any